Overwatch could be bigger if Team 4 wanted it to be. Team 4 is part of $1 trillion organization, and they're being tentative, and they're taking small steps, and they're not investing heavily. And so the burden then falls on teams to take the risk that they're not willing to take. Esports organizations are relatively small organizations in that framework, and it just, our business is not to subsidize $1 trillion companies. The data that we have internally here shows quite decisively that esports increases engagement, is a kind of a conduit for new people to try the game and play the game and become fans of the game. Like if Team 4, if somebody kind of there wakes up one day and basically says, why are we not as big as Valorant? They could be.
Is esports at the end of the day something that could be either sustainable or even profitable for teams?
If Team 4, wants to structure the league in such a way that the teams are able to generate sufficient revenues from MTX, I think we would be able to do it. I think esports teams have the potential to be even more profitable on a percentage basis than traditional sports teams.
Did Toronto Defiant, Overactive Media, did you guys apply for partnership?
No, we did not apply.
Before we get started today, I wanted to give my heartfelt thanks to you, the listener, for joining me on this brand new journey in 2025. It is a new year and a new opportunity to do something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. Start a show where I can speak to people that are interesting, of varied backgrounds, and explore the curiosities I have for the things that they love and that they do. So I wanted to make a promise to you listening right now that with your support, I will do my very best to provide the best content possible, starting with this very first episode, where I had the opportunity to sit down with Adam Adamou, the CEO of Overactive Media, who recently announced that Toronto Defiant, the OWCS team and former Overwatch League franchise team competing in professional Overwatch Esports, will not be returning for the 2025 season. We discuss why Adam decided not to have Toronto Defiant return for 2025, why he believes NRG were denied partnership status for 2025, what it would take for Overactive Media and the Toronto Defiant to return in 2026, and whether Adam believes that there is a positive and bright future for the esports industry. If you enjoy this episode, it would mean the world to me if you could give me a like, follow, or subscription on whatever platform you're listening to this on. And if you think someone else might enjoy this as well, to share this episode with somebody. Thank you very much. And now on to the episode. Adam, you are the co-founder, CEO of Overactive Media. It's the biggest ownership group in Canada for esports, and one of your flagship teams, in fact, the first team that you guys started with, is the Toronto Defiant. Now, over the past year in 2024, you guys have probably had your best ever year results-wise. We're talking about 4 first places in North America domestically. We're talking about 2nd place at the Esports World Cup under Toronto Ultra, 3rd place most recently, just last month in Stockholm for the World Final. So, I mean, how was this last year for you from your perspective?
Well, it was obviously a terrific year. Performance of the team across the board. We felt like we got the team that we wanted, the coaching staff, the people, the training, the facilities. We had a tier 1 esports program here for these guys, which is exactly what they deserve. And frankly, they delivered at our expectations and more. We finished top 10, I believe, at Esports World Cup, maybe 11, and that was thanks to the performance of Toronto Defiant at the EWC, and then of course dominating North America and finishing 3rd globally was just a fantastic year. I've been a big Overwatch Esports fan for many years. It was how we started in esports. In fact, over here, let me just show you. This is I don't know if you can see it there. This was our pitch document for Overwatch. You probably can't see it there, but this is what we did to basically get in. I've still got it here, and I was looking at it the other day, and yeah, it was a good way to pause our relationship with Overwatch Esports for now.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely get into that. I kind of wanted to touch up on why you guys decided to come back for this year in 2024 in general, because part of what's interesting me is the transition between last year to this year. Obviously, we came away from the Overwatch League. You guys were part of the Overwatch League for 5 years, and you decided, between 2023 and 2024 that, in fact, you guys were the only team or the only remaining Overwatch League franchise that decided to remain in the OWCS system, even though everyone else kind of was either tentative, maybe they were like just kind of looking at their options a little bit. NRG eventually came back as Shock, brought back NRG Shock, but you guys were straight away, you made a clear decision from day one that you were going to stay committed to OWCS for 2024. So, what was kind of the thinking behind that to come back this year?
Well, look, we enjoyed our time in the Overwatch League. I think the Overwatch League was a fantastic experiment, and we were sad to see it go. As you know, we hosted the final Grand Championship for Overwatch in Toronto, and I think that was a terrific way to say goodbye. But we've been very fortunate as a club, as an organization, to have been able to put together, a fantastic group of very passionate and dedicated fans of Overwatch Esports, of Toronto Defiant, and sponsors who were committed to supporting the program. And when we were looking at 2024 at OWCS, we still found that we had both the funding from sponsors and the support of the fans to continue with the new experiment, and so that's what we did. It was for us a no brainer, and we are optimistic about the transition, and where there's funding, there's hope, and that was kind of our plan for 2024.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like there was you guys were the most hopeful organization overall for many years. Or it seemed definitely you guys were on the top of the list when I think of organizations that were really behind the Overwatch Esports program. When I met you in person, spoke to you in Toronto Finals last year as well. I sort of got that from you and talking to you, and hearing about the fact that you guys were pretty committed to coming back. I mean, I knew there were some other teams that were potentially committed to coming back as well, that maybe then decided later on that it wasn't for them. So the interesting thing then is, as we get to probably the most important thing to talk about here, is the fact that you guys were committed to coming back for this year in 2024 with a decent amount of, hope looking at the Overwatch esports scene. But as we move into 2025, we just came back from Stockholm with the announcement of the partnership program into 2025 and all of the incentives and everything else that it comes with. And it looks like on paper, it looks like everything going to 2025 should be even stronger in terms of the offering, at least from the Blizzard side or the Overwatch esports side. However, you guys have decided not to return for next year for 2025. You came out with a statement not that long ago, about a week ago, I think December 12th, that you were going to take a break. You guys being Toronto Defiant, take a break for 2025, maybe reassess in 2026. Did Toronto Defiant Overactive me? Did you guys apply for partnership? What was that process, and what led to the decision to not return next year?
No, we did not apply. We looked at it. We spent quite a bit of time analyzing the plan and asking questions and having meetings. I think the staff at Blizzard, Sean Miller, and the people at Esports Basic Group have put together an interesting program. But ultimately, when we looked at the overall kind of viability of the package, let's say vis-a-vis where we were, we just couldn't figure out a way to make it work for us financially, even with the additional revenue share. The way that we look at esports is really pretty simple. We want to be able to get enough sponsorship revenue to be able to cover the cost of the club. So sponsors cover the cost of the club, and then the MTX, the digital items that are available for sale, that that's our profit, right? And and you need a profit to operate a business. You can't just basically do it for goodwill forever. And we've been involved with Overwatch for 6 years. When we were looking at the plans for 2025, we it looks like they're coming together very quickly. I know that there's transitions, changes that are happening to the ecosystem. I think that it's moving in the right direction, but there was just not a sufficient enough plan for us to be able to go to sponsors and partners and be able to say, here's the platform that you would be supporting for 2025 going forward. And I think it will come together. I have no doubt about that. But without visibility on the broadcast, on the season, on a whole bunch of other things, whether there's assets on the broadcast to be able to offer to sponsors and so forth, like traditional esports leagues, it's very difficult for us to go to sponsors and basically say, here's what you're getting when you're paying for it. And so then the only thing that we have to operate for is the skins or the digital media rights and maybe prize money. And we were not confident, based on what we saw, that was going to be sufficient to cover our costs. And from our perspective, look. Activision Blizzard is part of Microsoft. That's $1 trillion company. Esports Face It Group is part of a $1 trillion company, if you want to look at it that way. Esports organizations are relatively small organizations in that framework, and it just I can't look at the plan and say that we $1 trillion companies without the visibility that there is a path to break even in the immediate future without sponsors. Um, and so that was it. I mean, it was a difficult, calculated business decision. I hope that I'm wrong, and the numbers are better than we were anticipating that they would be. It's okay if they are. It's not like a big loss. We can come back the subsequent year, mea culpa, and say, "Wow, you guys did a fantastic job on the skins or the digital or the MTX." And then come hat in hand and look to come back. But for 2025, again, I can't see a path forward for us to basically break even or eke out a small profit, and so it was essentially a non-starter for us.
Yeah, I think like maybe the most interesting thing there is the fact that you guys did return for 2024 when it seemed like maybe the package wasn't going to be as attractive. I mean, this was the year that was kind of touted as the transition year. I mean, that's certainly what it seemed like to me. I think most people would look at the OWCS in 2024 and probably say like this is less of an offering, far less than what we received in the Overwatch League for at least from the outside looking in. But this was the year you guys decided to invest in. Next year, you guys are not coming back in. It seems like this would actually have been the year in 2024 to maybe have skipped a year and 2025 to have maybe invested, but you guys have kind of done it the opposite way around. Was it purely a timing thing? I mean, you mentioned sponsorships a couple of
Yeah,
different
yeah.
times there as well.
It's
So
it's it's sponsors, right? So yeah, so we have Bell and we had AMD and TD and a bunch of other partners that were willing to give it a shot in 2024 alongside us. We weren't sure what to expect, and we were very transparent about that. And frankly, the assets that we were able to deliver were insufficient. I don't think anybody, kind of came back and complained loudly. Like, everybody, nobody overpromised and underdelivered. It was, let's see what happened. Uh, and it was a trial year. It was positioned as a trial year, and now I think it's a second trial year. And we we think that it's worth kind of pausing now. I'm not going to go back and push them hard again. I probably could. They're fantastic partners of ours, but um, I'd rather wait a year and see what happens. In particular, with the amount that's going to come back from the partnership program. I think a lot of it depends on there. I know there's a lot of teams that are optimistic about it. I'm not sure what to think about it. I don't have any data points to basically set it against, and yeah, and so it's a good time to kind of wait and see what happens.
So what would it take for you guys to come back in 2026? As you did say, like specifically in your statement, but also here as well, that 2026 would be the year that you would look to bring back the brand, and maybe not as Toronto Defiant, maybe as a different brand like Toronto Ultra, maybe KOI or something else. But I mean, what would it actually take? Like, is there a specific metric you're looking for? Is there a specific thing that you're looking for from Blizzard to say, like, here, this is what we can offer in 2026? Is that then meeting the bar of what you're requiring to come back?
Yeah. So look, from our perspective, the four biggest games, at least the ones that are in our universe, uh, are um, are Counter-Strike 2, Valorant, Call of Duty, and League of Legends. And each one of those has, seven-figure potential from, either MTX or from, the league partnership directly. And so we consider those to be tier one esports. They're very difficult to get in. They're strict partnership guidelines. We're fortunate that we're in all of them. We have done very well in all four of them. That's the core of our business. And then the rest of the games, we see those as tier two esports. And I measure tier two esports in part by, what is the revenue that we can generate directly from the game, excluding sponsors, right? And that typically is going to come from MTX or some minimum guarantees from the league itself. And I would put in this group, Rocket League, Rainbow Six, Halo, Overwatch, those types of games. And um, and typically, we're not in any of those, by the way. Typically, we don't believe that those games are big enough in terms of the user base or in terms of the support from the publisher to allow teams to generate sufficient revenue from the MTX side of the business for us to be able to basically make a viable go of it from kind of an ongoing business perspective. Um, and so so we look at them and we poke and we try to figure it out, and ultimately we decide there's not enough upside in those games for us to invest the kinds of investments we need to make. For Overwatch, I think there is, of those games I just mentioned, I think Overwatch has the best chance to emerge as another tier one game. But I believe it's up to Team Four. I would say at the end of the day, it's up to Team Four and Blizzard. But probably the way that I see it is that it's really the actual development team that has the kind of say on it. If Team Four wants to structure the league in such a way that the teams are able to generate sufficient revenues from MTX, I think we would be able to do it. I think at this point they're unsure. I think they're a little tentative. They're taking small steps, um, slowly, to figure it out. And like I was saying, Team Four is part of $1 trillion organization, and they're being tentative, and they're taking small steps, and they're not investing heavily, and so the burden then falls on teams to take the risk that they're not willing to take. Um, and that's just not our business. I mean, that's what it is. Some teams may want to take that risk. I just don't see our business is not to subsidize $1 trillion companies. It's for them to establish the guidelines, provide visibility to the revenue that we can get, and then we will go out and do the best job possible of any team in the world within that league. That's our model.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like right now that maybe your opinion of some of the other teams coming in, that they maybe are taking a bit of a risk, because perhaps the package that for the offering coming through from Blizzard, with us, the Team 4 side, the microtransactions, or what it's looking like on the esports side going into next year, is maybe not attractive enough for you guys just yet from the MTX model, and that might have to improve going into 2026 for you guys to consider making a return. And I was quite surprised actually when the announcement happened at the end of this year in Stockholm that partnerships were even returning. I was not expecting that from the announcement at all. I think a lot of the fans were probably not actually really expecting something like that to ever come back. I got the feeling that after the Overwatch League, the devs are going to be kind of hands off. They were not going to be that keen on maybe taking a toe back in and taking a bite out of that chunk again for as far as esports goes. There was the overwhelming impression they were wanting to be a lot more hands off with esports in the future. So I guess in some ways it's like a good thing. It's a good news to see that they are willing to take a step back in. I mean, you guys were, I don't know if you had more expressed information even before that coming in to 2024, knowing that, hey, there's a chance that maybe the devs are willing to back this again. And now that they have, it sounds like, maybe the offering isn't quite there. I mean, you were saying before that a lot of these other teams are definitely potentially taking a bit of a risk, and you guys aren't willing to do that yet. So, yeah, I mean, are you surprised that the devs are even making this move at all? I mean, going from Overwatch League
No,
to OWCS,
no,
it's
I'm
like,
not surprised. Yeah,
okay,
no, I'm not surprised. Look, I'm not sure if you read Jason Schreier's book on Blizzard. I went through it. I was there for part of it with respect to the Overwatch League, and again, most of most of my kind of understanding of the inner workings come from that book right now, and there seems to have been a bit of a back and forth between
right.
Team Four and people at Activision Blizzard and so forth. And I don't agree with some of the decisions and the outcomes. I think this league had a lot of opportunities that perhaps were squandered a little bit. But we, Team Four is fundamental to the success of the esport and of the game. I think they're the quarterbacks of the ecosystem, and I'm happy. I was actually surprised that they came back for 24. To be honest, I wasn't sure that they would be coming back. We invited them to the grand finals in Toronto, of course, and they were there and had a chance to talk to them. And we were lobbying hard for them to um, build an esports ecosystem, even at that time. And
Are you
they
saying
did.
are you saying you're surprised that
Um,
OWCS came back for 2024, or that Team Four have any interest in using
Yeah,
it?
the team four was the team four basically wanted to come back and continue with the esport. It wasn't clear to us that with Overwatch League closing down that there was an appetite at Team Four or at Blizzard, more holistically to continue with the esport. And so, like I said, we were happy and we lobbied them frankly to the extent that we could to come back and again I think the health and the success of the ecosystem is fundamentally uh, related to what Team Four does more so than what Sean Miller or the OWCS does or even what EFL Basic Group does or ESL Basic Group. Sorry, it begins with the publisher and developer. Okay, and they design the ecosystem and they make the determination of how important esports is going to be to their platform. Both to the marketing and how they express the vision for the game, both as a game and as an esport. And I was happy to see that they had a vision in that direction. And they are moving very cautiously, in a better direction, I think, but they're moving very slowly
Hmm.
and very tentatively. And so therefore, from our perspective, we have some time to wait and see what happens, right? If they were moving very, very quickly, we would be in a position where we might need to make a different decision. But this new partnership, my understanding is it's a 1 year partnership. It's not like a multi-year thing. I think it's going to be another year, a 1 year trial, and then um, we'll see what happens. And if it's a series of 1 year agreements, you can jump on the bus or hop back off the bus and see what happens, depending on your experience with it.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was a 1 year agreement. That's actually very interesting. Like I would have expected that maybe it was going to be a longer agreement, or they would maybe offer the teams a little bit more there. So we'll definitely see how that one goes for the
That's
teams.
my understanding. I mean, I haven't. We didn't apply, and so I don't
Right.
have access to the final doc. I haven't signed anything, right? So
So it could
so
have
that's my
changed, or
understanding. It may be longer, but yeah,
right.
something is that again, it's kind of or maybe it's like bring in these 9 teams and then maybe expand it. My point being is more that I think there's going to be additional opportunities for us
Sure,
to come
sure.
back in. The door is not closed forever here.
Yeah, for sure. I actually want to rewind it a little bit and I was very curious about something from transitioning from the Overwatch League to OWCS because as some people might be aware that at the end of Toronto Finals last year, which you guys hosted, as you mentioned, shortly afterwards there was an owners meeting to sort of decide the future of the Overwatch League, whether it was going to continue or whether it was going to be dissolved. And I believe at the time the 19 remaining franchise, with Chengdu having already dipped out, that between the 19 of the owners, you guys were going to cast some sort of a vote where a certain number of votes were required to maintain the Overwatch League. And if they didn't reach that threshold, it was going to be dissolved. Obviously, we know the result of that, having been a year later now. Obviously, the Overwatch League did dissolve and not enough owners ended up voting towards that. You could correct the record if you'd like on this one. To my understanding, you guys as Overactive Media actually voted to dissolve, right? You guys did not vote to return. And so it's kind of, but then you also did come back for the OWCS, so I kind of want to figure out what the transition process was there and like the sort of decision making in terms of if you felt like the Overwatch League model at that point in 2023 needed to end and you would like to see a different model come through that you were more interested in returning for, or what was your thinking towards the end of 2023 leading to the end of Overwatch League?
Well, look, I'm not at liberty to disclose those, you know, discussions which were confidential in nature, or the votes which were, I think, confidential in nature. But I will say that we were one of the core organizations that was working very closely with the league um, to restructure, rethink, and determine the future of the Overwatch League at the time. And it became, I think it's pretty clear, that the league as designed had to change. Whether the change would be something more similar to what the Call of Duty League did, which was maintain the structure and then adapt internally, or whether it needed to be dissolved and then restarted. I guess we can debate, but that model for that league just was not positioned to be successful, either for the teams or for the publishers or the developers, maybe even for the fans and the players. So drastic change had to happen, and there was various opportunities, and I'm not dissatisfied with the way that it ended. Um, but I do think there were models that we could have used that. Again, I would point out the Call of Duty League model as being an outstanding transition. I think we're very happy with the way the Call of Duty League evolved and the direction that that's taken. And I am sad a little bit that the Overwatch League didn't move in that direction, but I don't think we have the support there to do that transition like we did in the Call of Duty League.
You don't think there was the possibility that maybe Overwatch League could have potentially done the same thing as the Call of Duty League, and as you say, like having more of an internal change. As I understand in the Call of Duty League, we have stuff. They have things like the minimum salaries are gone, the franchise initial franchise payments given back to the teams, all that kind of detail. And I just felt like, is there not that opportunity? Was that opportunity not quite on the table for Overwatch League? Is that not a possibility at all? It seemed quite strange to me that the way it sounds, especially from what you were saying, but also what I gathered from some of the other teams as well, in terms of the two different sorts of leagues here, that the CDL offering was clearly much better in terms of what they wanted to do in terms of reshuffling and readjusting their league compared to the Overwatch League, and that seemed quite strange to me. So I guess, was that not available for Al at all?
Look, it goes. As I was saying, it begins with the developer and then the publisher kind of working in tandem together. And I think Call of Duty is got a different development team, and frankly, the Activision side, and the Overwatch League, has Team Four, and they've got the Blizzard side, and so it begins there with the desire to kind of go forward. I know that. I know that there were some difficult discussions internally at Activision Blizzard on both sides in terms of the future of these, and some difficult decisions that needed to be made. And Call of Duty benefited from the fact that there was a smaller number of teams. There was only 12 teams. Most of them were in North America. Um, and I think it was a simpler path forward. Overwatch had more teams. It was global. I think practically speaking, um, it would have been much more difficult to move in the direction that we did in the Call of Duty League. I do think, aspirationally, I would love to see an Overwatch League or OWCS evolve into, the Call of Duty League model at some point. Though again, it's a little tougher because look, Call of Duty is fundamentally a North American game. It's console based. It is kind of marketed, I would say, America first. Europe is very strong. As you know, we're holding the first Call of Duty major in Madrid in partnership with Movistar KOI, which is our team in Spain. We're having a lot of excitement from French teams and fans and English fans. So I think we're going to have an incredible event in Europe for the Call of Duty League. But that's basically it. The market for Call of Duty, maybe a little bit in Latin America, whereas the best players in the world for the Overwatch are in Asia, in particular in Korea, and it it just that brought in complexities. Never mind what was going on in China, that probably made it difficult to continue in the way that we did with Call of Duty League.
I mean, what would you like to see out of Overwatch Esports in that kind of way? Because you mentioned that you were quite a bit more fond of the Call of Duty League and their sort of model. It's just interesting to me because OWCS seems like, at least right now on paper, going through partnerships, there's something reminiscent a little bit, at least from my perspective, that it's kind of similar to VCT, what they're doing with Valorant in terms of the partnerships there as well, albeit on a much smaller scale. I mean, is there like any sort of, if you could, as your own sort of wish list selfishly, and this could just be some sort of wishful thinking, like if you could have designed Overwatch Esports, maybe even moving between 2023 to 2024, that would have been a much better ecosystem for the teams that you think would have been sustainable as a business, as an esport, as an industry. Like what is the esport that you would like to see from Overwatch?
Look, I think VCT and CDL are are probably two of the best in terms of the structure that we have. VCT is obviously maybe closer to where Overwatch can be because it is global. Um, but Riot is an esports first company, right? I mean, their primary marketing vehicle for their game is the esport, and it's been incredibly successful from that perspective. Esports drives engagement, drives fandom, drives the discussion for Valorant, and also drives kind of revenue for the teams. So I think VCT is the gold standard for esports leagues, both from the investment from the publishers, the developers, the teams, the ecosystems, the influencers, the co-streamers. It's a well-oiled, integrated machine. Call of Duty's slightly different, but I think in its own way, it is it's up there. Like I said, we believe it's one of the top four. Um, Overwatch ultimately, again, I don't know. Overwatch could be bigger if Team Four wanted it to be. And again, from our perspective, and again, this is no disrespect to them, they need to figure out their business plan and how they want to market the game and how they want to kind of position the esport. But Riot and Activision, with respect to Call of Duty, have shown a greater willingness to invest in the ecosystem to make it viable for teams and partners and MTX and the other things that we were talking about. And uh, Overwatch is moving in that direction, but rather slowly. Okay, which indicates to us that Team Four is not fully invested in it, and that's cool. It's not for everybody, but like I said, until they decide to become fully invested, our feeling is that we are effectively subsidizing their indecision, and it's just not for us to do it. They're much bigger than we are and have greater resources.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that Overwatch could
And
be
look, and one way I can look at it is just the prize money for this year, right? So
true.
again, prize money is not what we play for, right? We that's not our kind of business model. But the prize money for the World Championships were like $500,000, right? And that
Yeah,
was a pretty good skin that was sold, right? But just the one skin, right? So the total revenue from that available for the payout was 500,000, right? So that's pretty low. And
yeah,
if you make skins available for 9 teams, it's not clear to me whether you're sharing 500,000, across 9 teams, which would obviously be very low per team, or will you be getting 500,000 per team, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether the range is 50,000 per team on MTX or 500,000 per team on MTX. I don't think anybody can tell me, but my gut feel is that you know the nature of MTX is, the Team Four has a formula, and they understand what sells and what doesn't sell. And if they wanted that prize money to be 5 million instead of 500,000, they probably could have made it 5 million, right? So I see the 500,000 not as the result of just that's where sales, happen to be. That was part of the plan. Okay. And then I think the first split was 250,000. So there was
Yeah,
750,000 in MTX sales available to the ecosystem from Team Four. And I mean, I'm sure you'll agree that's a very small
it
investment.
is. It is.
So um, and so it's hard for me to know like what is the investment for this year. Is that the number divided by 9 teams plus whatever the league gets?
Yeah.
Is it 10 times that? Is it 2 times that? It look unless when you take a look at the numbers from the other tier one esports that I mentioned, like they're much bigger, right? And so like we've got limited capacity, and it's not just up to which games we enjoy. It's which, beginning with the developer and the publisher, which ones are investing the most in the game and the esport for us to be in a position to expend the resources necessary to create not just an okay team, of college kids, but to do it in a professional, high tier manner. I mean, that's just what we do. And if it's not there, which we don't think it is
Hmm.
right now, it may get there. Okay, then um, then it's reasonable for us to wait. It's not like it's not an unreasonable thing for us to wait, and it's not unreasonable for them to take it slow. Right? They didn't have a great experience with Overwatch League, so one step at a time.
Yeah, I mean, I just had a quick glance over at what the VCT championship bundles end up selling for. I believe it was 20 million 2023 last year, and then 35 million for this year. So that, I mean, we're talking about a gigantic, Grand Canyon sized gulf between that and a 250K and a 500K. So I mean, it is interesting you said that, like, if Team Four decided to, they could have sold more. Is it simply just a case of the skin wasn't, the offering in terms of the skin, the MTX wasn't good enough? They could have offered something better. They could have offered more. Is it simply on that front? Because it sounds like, maybe Team Four could have put in more, but what does that look like? Because is it just from the skin front? Like, hey, put up a much better skin for that sort of championship bundle, and we'll start there, and we'll address the prize pool. Maybe Blizzard themselves, Team Forkins themselves, could even inject more money, because we looked at the Overwatch League. Even last year's final was something like I can't remember, 1.5 mil, something like that, and that
Yeah,
was just pure
yeah.
prize pool, not from MTX or something like that. So is it on both fronts? Could Blizzard put in more money just in total from their own cash pool, or is it more like put up much better skins? Like what's actually going on here? Like,
I don't know what's going on, to be sure, but I can tell you that look the when it comes to MTX, right? The I believe that what the thinking that goes on is this new revenue, or are we cannibalizing revenue that we would have made anyway, right? So you have a skin, and you sell like $1 million or whatever of that skin. Is that coming because of the efforts of this team in this particular game, or is that revenue that we are losing because we would have been able to get it anyway and not shared it with these guys? That's kind of the idea. That's what's called cannibalization, right? Where you're just basically reducing your own take. In our view and in our experience with the best in the esports world, that money is completely accretive. When somebody comes in and buys a Call of Duty skin for the Toronto Ultra, which was the best-selling skin in the world for Call of Duty League, um, that is accretive. They come in and they are fans of the team or the design that we've put together, and then we have a revenue share partnership back with the Call of Duty League or with VCT, where where we do the marketing. We have a marketing plan. All of this stuff is part of our platform with these particular leagues, and we help to drive revenue to them through our efforts. And you have to kind of mentally, as a developer, see that as being accretive. In other words, um, kind of creating revenue for you rather than moving revenue from your pocket to the esports pocket. Um, and so again, strictly my opinion here. I don't have any discussions with anybody, but I'm a business person, and I can know how people think based on the indications that I get from things. That they're concerned that that this would cannibalize their own revenue. And so they're going slowly. They're not putting a lot of effort onto it. They're trying to figure out, what is the endemic demand for the skins that doesn't come from their pocket, but is accretive to the teams. And they're being very careful with that. And that's why the numbers are lower. If they wanted the number to be higher, I think that number higher. I mean, you do charity things where they do 10 and 12 million dollars. It's a big game, right? Um, and I always kind of believe, and again, this could be completely wrong. Maybe I'm giving their formulas too much credit, but I believe there's probably an algorithm somewhere where you kind of put in some details of what the skin could look like, and other parameters in a spreadsheet, and it kind of probably pops out like how much revenue you can expect from that particular program. And so my view is when they were doing that, they wanted to put in a number that was smaller rather than bigger. And, and so that's what it is. I think we would like to see a platform where, for each of the teams, there's $1 million opportunity for MTX, right? I think Overwatch is a big enough game that could be the case. I think that would be accretive. I think it would be beneficial to Team 4. I think it would help the ecosystem to thrive. I think it would help boost revenues overall and engagement and viewership, um, just like it has for Valorant. And I think Team 4 still needs a little convincing. And so hopefully with this next step, they will be able to get additional data, and then maybe the year after or the year after that, they will feel comfortable enough investing into it.
I mean, an argument that could be made that we've already actually been through the system. We've had the skins before. You've been through the Overwatch League for 5 years with Toronto Defiant. You guys have had skins there. You mentioned that you have with Toronto Ultra, the best-selling skin in the Call of Duty League, and you also mentioned that the target here you would like to see is 7 figures of MTX revenue. I assume that means for the team, maybe per team, right? So, is that something you're able to get in CDL? But that's something that just wasn't the case for something in the Overwatch League, where again, you have skins and you had skins in both games, but is it the Overwatch League skins, which, as far as I understand the offering, I mean, it's basic. We're looking at very big. I mean, I guess in Call of Duty, you have the gun skins, or there's maybe a little bit more offering there. In Overwatch, it's purely like a character skin. Maybe that's the sort of thing there. But yeah, is there something different about what's on the table here between what is being offered?
No. Yeah, no, look, the model before was a different model, so we can't compare Overwatch League or League before to the current models. Most of these games have been restructured, particularly Call of Duty. With the changes that happened, the transition that we moved, changed the economics and the way that it worked. And Overwatch OWCS is clearly a different thing, and Overwatch League had its own model as well. So there's nothing comparable that I could go back to the Overwatch League and say, hey, these would be the expectations for these types of skins for the Overwatch League. The only thing I have to compare it to is Call of Duty League and VCT. I would say those are the two best positioned from our perspective that we're involved in. And maybe Call of Duty League is the better example, because again, I think Riot aspirationally is just doing esports on a global scale, and I think succeeding incredibly well. Frankly, um, I don't think Blizzard or Team 4 is ready to go that far. But I would simply say, look, take a look at the Call of Duty League model, set up that model, and um, and then don't put any brakes on our ability to sell skins, right? Don't kind of, again, I for right or wrong, I do believe that there are things that the developer can do within the algorithm. They have their system, they have their platform, they have all of the data in the world for who buys what skin, at what level, at what revenue generation. They have all of this stuff. Believe me, this is data science, okay? And if they wanted the the revenues to be higher or lower, they can figure out a way to do that, no matter what the teams do, right? So they need to create an ecosystem where the expectation is, look, if you do a good job on your skin, you have free reign to generate, at least $1 million a year for yourself as a team. Of course, they get a revenue share as well, like there's a partnership. And that opens us up to investment in the ecosystem, and sponsorships and the other things. And that's what creates, I think, a good, healthy ecosystem. And so, again, I maybe we've been talking a little bit too much about the developer here, but I really, I think Esports Basic Group is doing a fantastic job in terms of, they're investing heavily. I think, it's not an easy thing to just start a league from scratch
Hmm.
and try to put everything together, the talent and all of those things. I think they're doing a great job. I think the people at OWCS that I've dealt with, very helpful, very positive, very kind of motivated. But the bottleneck is at the front door, which is Team Four and the development team. And like I said, I think we've more or less done that topic. It's just I need to see a greater investment from them in the ecosystem. Um, and right now they're being very, very cautious. And if they're cautious, I should be even more cautious
Yeah.
because they're 1,000 times bigger than us, right? Maybe 10,000 times, whatever the multiple is, right?
Yeah,
So
I think the good news there is actually, there is some data to suggest that, the average spend of an esports viewer is actually higher than the average spend of just a casual player. So I
yeah,
don't
for
have that
sure.
data on hand to publicly share, but that's pretty credible data that I've been privy to, that I've seen. So I mean, that's actually maybe a pretty positive thing. Talking about esports maybe a little bit more in general, because I think we have talked quite a decent about Team 4, and for what it's worth, I actually do agree with a lot of it there. Maybe some surprising stuff that we got there as well. But it does seem like, maybe the tentativeness a little bit. I don't know if it's maybe an audience issue there as well. I don't know if you had an opinion on that, because I do look at some of these other games. CDL is one step up, but then VCT even further. And if you look at Counter-Strike, maybe even further so, in terms of the competitive nature of the audience, how competitive they are, just as a base player base, as a base audience, and their level of appetite for the esports. I mean, we've seen larger audience for Overwatch Esports. Overwatch League Season 1, Season 2 had quite a significant audience. It was a level of significant hype there. Maybe it was a different time, maybe a pre-COVID thing. I mean, there's a number of different factors there. Perhaps I'm just making excuses on behalf of Overwatch. I don't know if it's an audience difference there as well. The Valorant audience or Counter-Strike audience is far more willing to participate in esports-related MTX or esports-related activities in general. I'm aware that in Counter-Strike, they're able to do unbelievable amounts of financials on their MTX, but that's partially driven probably by, I would assume, gambling. Also, the resale of the stickers and stuff like that. There's a lot of high resale value in their skins. So,
Yeah.
would you say maybe there's an audience thing as well, or is it just purely those games just have like insane models for how they're handling MTX, whether that's through resale on the market or something else that's in the game itself?
Yeah, look, it depends on the size of the player base, right? So you're only going to be generating MTX revenue for the people that are playing the game. So the bigger the player base, the greater the potential for the game. And um, publishers are always very reticent to announce what their player bases are for whatever
Yeah, I
reason. But
bet.
we do get some visibility via Steam, where you can kind of go in and take a look. And I think Overwatch, tends to do reasonably well on Steam, keeping in mind that many of the player base are also on BattleNet, which doesn't get captured through Steam, or on console. So
Yep.
so I think Overwatch has a pretty strong player base.
They announced 100
Um,
million accounts, I
I
think,
think,
recently, right? So,
yeah, and that doesn't surprise me. So that's your market, let's say, for Team Four, let's say, or for the developers in general and the publisher. Their market is the people that are playing the game that's who you can basically sell stuff to, because it's a free to play game. Almost every game in esports is free to play except for Call of Duty. And so, 100% of your revenue, if you're the developer, has to come from those skin sales. And so you want to drive the player base higher. And the data that we have internally here shows quite decisively that esports increases engagement, is a kind of a conduit for new people to try the game and play the game and become fans of the game. It's kind of an onboarding tool, and I think
Mm.
some publishers invest heavily in that, and others don't, I would say. And of the second tier of esports, one of the reasons we continue to swirl around Overwatch is we think that has the best potential to move into from tier two to tier one. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been trying to convince them for many years now, since before Overwatch League kind of finished over. And again, I hope that it will get there at some point. But if Team Four, if somebody kind of there wakes up one day and basically says, "Why are we not as big as Valorant?" Right?
Right.
Um, they could be, I mean, why couldn't they be? I mean, Valorant does very little marketing outside of esports. And frankly, when you spend money on esports, it's not just your own money that you're spending, it's the money of all of the organizations that are involved in that esports. So the money that I spend, the marketing that I bring, the co-streamers that I hire, the marketing that we do, everything that we do subsidizes your investment into the marketing of your game. So there's those that basically understand that and get it and create an ecosystem that is conducive to that and frankly succeed very well. There's other games that are just frankly just not big enough, right? They're just not enough
Yeah.
of a player base. No matter how much we did, that we could generate enough off of that smaller base, that we could generate the revenues. But Overwatch is kind of in this kind of mid ground, and I'm not going to say, like, I'm a little disappointed that 2025 isn't moving forward in a more aggressive fashion, and maybe it is, and I just don't know it. But if it is, nobody was able to kind of explain that to me. So I'm expecting 2025 will be a year of continued incremental growth. I think they're going to try to bring in some new organizations that may kind of increase the base a little bit. I think they're moving in the right direction. I would say it's kind of BCT, kind of light, very
Mm-hmm.
light, extra light.
Extra
Um,
light.
and I think, and I think they may decide to move. I would certainly encourage them to move in that direction, because again, I think there's a niche for Overwatch to be, among the biggest esports in the world. And for whatever reason, we haven't been able to convince Team Four and Blizzard of that yet.
Well, it seems like some teams are somewhat convinced going to next year. I won't touch up on any of the unconfirmed rumors about which organizations are going to be coming in for next year. I mean, those are all over social media at this point. I'm sure by the time that this comes out, some of that might actually be officially announced. But one thing that has officially come out, I wouldn't mind getting your take on this one, is that Andy Miller from NRG has announced that they were actually denied partnership. So they applied for partnership for OWCS in 2025, and they were actually denied partnership. So something that is interesting about that is there is enough interest from organizations that Blizzard had managed to find enough orgs. Like, I believe 3 is a number for each region. So they have their 3 organizations for North America, and felt like NRG actually didn't make the cut. So, I mean, you're someone that through Overactive didn't actually end up going through that process. You decided it wasn't for you. NRG and some other organizations did. Do you have any sort of, if you were just to even guess, what is Blizzard looking for here? If they were to cut NRG, a team that's already been part of the Overwatch ecosystem for so long, and through Andy's own words, he was saying that Shock actually had the biggest brand in North America, or one of the biggest brands in Overwatch League, as well as being maybe one of the winningest teams.
Look, again, I know, only based on the material that we received, what they were looking for from the partner side. I'm surprised that they didn't get in, but I think the competition is stiff. There's only 3 spots, and That appears to be the case, and again, I haven't seen any names confirmed. I've seen the same rumors that you have, but there's quite a strong list of organizations out there that want to dip their toe in, and it's possible that they wanted to basically you know bring in new fans, or maybe kind of go in a different direction. I really don't know. I wouldn't see this as a slight against stock. I would see this really kind of as a compliment to the strength of the applications that came from the other guys. I mean, if they were able to basically get chosen over shock, that means that they were pretty damn good applications. And so
Yeah.
I would look at it positively rather than negatively. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe to the dismay of Shock fans, but maybe to to perhaps in the future when an announcement comes out, people could be maybe positive to see that we have some large new organizations coming on if it all goes well. I'm actually curious about the esports industry in a way as well, because there is some chatter about I think a lot of fans don't quite understand how the esports business structure works, and we're getting a lot of that insight right now from what you're saying, especially coming through from the developer side and what you're looking for on the team side. Now, as we move through Overwatch, one of the biggest things that we saw, there was some a lot of chatter about the fact that many teams are losing too much money. Some of that is self-inflicted. We've seen that even in other games like League of Legends and VCT, where teams are spending an inordinate amount of money on stuff like salaries, right? They're ballooning their own costs, spending through a bunch of their own VC money. Is esports at the end of the day something that could be either sustainable or even profitable for teams? Is it already there? Are we already in the position where, I think even at the end of Overwatch 3, we're starting to see some teams finish in the green, although a lot of the teams that did finish in the green for any of the Overwatch League years seem to have done that maybe through very, very aggressive cuts to their own expenditure. And you also mentioned that reaching somewhat of a 7-figure MTX figure is kind of like the mark of, what you would like to see. So is that what is required to reach sustainability or profitability for a team?
Yeah, look, I think so. First of all, I think we're out of esports winter. Okay,
That's
we're
good.
kind of
I'm glad to hear
beyond
that.
that. I think, yeah, I think our revenues are on track to be up 70% this year, 70%. We've we entered VCT EMEA, and we're obviously in LEC with a team that made it to Worlds in Counter Strike 2. Our team made it to the first major. We didn't make it to the second, but we were in the first major, which was helpful. We did well at EWC. Again, I looked at my stats. We were 11th place in EWC. We're a partner organization for EWC. Call of Duty League, as I mentioned, we have a very strong team. We finished third overall last season. We're undefeated this season, and we had the best-selling skins in the world for Call of Duty League in 2020 for the 2024 season. So things are moving in the right direction. I think I think it is from our perspective. Profitability is near. That is, we're planning for profitability. The era of burning through VC money is, I think, over for probably every team, I would hope. Um, and what we have decided for our business is to focus on those core games that I mentioned that have the greatest MTX potential, with some of the best partnership agreements with the publishers that are heavily invested in the ecosystem, and those are the four games that I mentioned earlier. And then to look at everything else kind of opportunistically, um, to see what the cost benefit analysis is. Um, but running esports teams, I think it's easier to be profitable in an esport, like one. It is harder to be profitable if you are like us. We're one of the very few global organizations. We have teams in Europe and North America. We've got strong fan base in Latin America. We're on 3 continents. We've got between us and our influencers over 100 million followers now. So that's a lot of people. And so it is expensive. Those fixed costs that you have of running teams, putting everybody together, putting them in apartments, all of that stuff costs money. And that's your kind of fixed cost level. And what you need to do is drive the revenue, um, ideally from sponsorships in particular, to the point where you can cover the costs of your teams. And if you can do that, you can really drive a lot of profitability through the MTX, right? If you can cover your costs through sponsorships, you can basically leave the MTX as your profitability. And I don't think any team is there yet, but that is, I think, a clear path forward for esports teams. That's the way that we're organizing our business right now, to structure it so that the cost of the team is tied to the sponsorships that are willing to fund it. Okay, and then our marketing and all the other stuff is geared towards driving those MTX revenues. Every game that we have has a co-streamer. We do a lot of marketing and a lot of promotion. We hold a lot of live events. As you know, we're doing the major in Madrid. We're doing the Call of Duty World Championship in Toronto in 25. That's already been announced. There's a number of other things that have been announced. We just had KOI Con also in Spain a few months ago. We do a lot of that to drive the engagement. We want the audience to be fans of our teams, and then we partner with sponsors to provide access to those fans, and then those fans go out and buy our MTX and help to generate a return. I think we're very, very close to being there. Now, biggest challenge is team salaries and costs, and those have been coming down, I think, a little bit over the last few years. I hope that we can maintain a lid on those costs, which are have been significant. Some games are having a better adjustment than others. Um, but the problem with sports, as you know, Kevin, is that you know the guy with the guy willing to spend the biggest amount helps to drive the salaries for everybody else, right? So you could have like everybody being disciplined and watching their costs, and then a couple of teams get fresh money or new,
Mhm.
their passes be to win a world championship, and then they go out and spend a whole bunch of money, and then of course the agents all get excited, and then that drives the costs up for everybody. And so we are trying to be disciplined on that front, and focused, and I think most teams are, but that's always a struggle in sports, is that the big spender sets the salaries for the entire industry.
Yeah, that scares me because we've gone through the phase of people way overspending on salaries. I'm talking like, we've got players, maybe not necessarily in Overwatch, and actually I think in Overwatch League we actually had some of the more tamer salaries, maybe like based on if you were based on context, some of them probably were potentially still too high. But when you talk about like $1 million plus contracts with certain players in other games, some of them might deserve it. If we're talking about the players with the highest level of profile in terms of their following, like if you got people like maybe Scump with millions of followers, I could see that being like worth it. But if you have guys on some other, I don't want to name that, I don't want to call any specific orgs here, but it's like you could talk about players that like are making unbelievable bank and they don't have anywhere near the pull to actually potentially deserve something like that. Maybe that's potentially my opinion, but yeah, I mean, it is concerning a little way, and I hope the OWCS system in 2025 doesn't start to attract that, because not to spin the rumor wheel a little bit more, but based on rumors, it already sounds like there's the potential for overspending coming back in. We're getting quote-unquote reports. I'm going to quotation mark that one because they're not super verified and potentially not that accurate, but even just the rumor that some teams might be looking to spend Overwatch League salaries again does actually scare me a little bit. But you did mention that you guys were on a good pathway here because you guys are in the Tier 1 leagues, you've VCT, you've got LEC, all that kind of stuff as well. It sounds like that's kind of what is required for a team to get to that level. You're also very focused on sponsorships. Talked about sponsorships, as you brought up a number of times, and that was an important thing to get back into OWCS as well. I mean, it's not that it's your job to help other teams, and I mean, other teams are other teams and they run their business their own way. You're going to run your business your way to reach some level of sustainability or profitability. But in an esport, it would require there to be an ecosystem of a number of teams that would ideally be able to be sustainable. And you also mentioned we're kind of coming out of esports winter, which is like really hopeful to me. Like that was something I probably didn't expect to get out of this conversation. I was thinking this esports winter could be, something like a Game of Thrones thing where it just goes on for generations. I didn't actually see what it would take to get out of the esports winter, but maybe it sounds like sponsorships looking pretty healthy. I mean, I don't know if that's something that's really that readily available to every team though. I mean, is there some level of zero sum there where like, not everyone's going to have access to the same sponsors? I've heard things where, maybe you're an LEC, for let's use LEC for an example. You're fighting for the same pool of sponsorships. I'm kind of assuming that. I'm also basing that on some sort of information. Like if the popular teams like G2 scoop up all the sponsorships, it's really hard for like a bottom 8th, 7th place team to look for any level of sponsorships. So, is that necessarily a good pathway for every team, or just something that only the top teams, where like you guys can be like, yeah, we're an LEC VCT, we can get the best sponsors, and if you're 7th or 8th, well, it's just too bad.
Well, I don't know what every team's numbers are. I just know our own numbers, and I think I think I think it doesn't all go. There's enough sponsorship revenue to basically go around. Is my sense, of course, right? And so, like in VCT, this is our first year in. We the we kind of ended up getting the previous slot reassigned to us when we acquired the assets of KOI earlier in March. Um, and our team was not very good, and the team that preceded us in the first year, which was not our responsibility, they didn't do very well. So that was 2 years of basically effectively last place finishes for it. And our revenue from the MTX was actually quite strong, notwithstanding. So there's more that goes to it. Now, like if you're bad forever, then I think you're going to have fans, kind of falling off, right? But there is, particularly in the early years, there's a lot of marketing and there's a lot of things that you can do to build your brand and engage with your audience, and they will give you the benefit of the doubt, as long as you don't let them down forever. So our experience as a bottom dwelling team has been reasonably positive. And so that allowed us, of course, to be able to invest a little bit more in our team, and hopefully we'll move up. It is in esports, maybe this is a bit of a segue, because you don't have a draft like you have in professional sports like NBA or NHL, where the bottom teams get a higher draft. The better teams always have an advantage, because players want to go and play with the teams that are already good. And so when you have the free agents or the rookies that are coming up, um, a team that is not as good consistently or is at the bottom, it is much harder for them to get better. Um, so I think that's one of the issues, and I would say to those teams, um, you got to take a chance. You've got to invest in your staff, in your scouting, in your coaching, in your positional coaching, in your therapists, and all of that stuff. And then you have to basically go out and take a risk, which is what we did with the LEC this year. We brought in 4 rookies for the second time in 5 years. We brought in 4 rookies and partnered them up with an established player, and both times we made it to the World Championships. Um, and that also helps with budgets as well, right? When you
Yeah.
can kind of refresh because of the strength of your scouting and your developmental system. So look, there's many ways to basically be successful in this industry. I think the least successful has been established to be to try to go out and spend a lot of money on a super team. We've just seen that fail over and over and over again, and I really hope that era is behind us, because it actually hurts more than just the team that is doing it. It hurts the ecosystem, it hurts the fans,
Right.
and it hurts the salaries of everybody else that has to be paying them.
I will say that you guys did, technically speaking, have a bit of a super team, but you guys probably, I mean, I think you guys did super well this year. I don't know if you're happy with the results or not, but you certainly dominated your region, so you got check that one off the box.
For Overwatch,
Yeah.
yeah. Look, I mean,
Yeah.
we want to win worlds in Overwatch,
Yeah.
and that's another thing, that is difficult both in League of Legends as well, right? Because the Asian region, especially Korea, is just so dominant. I mean, and there's a lot of reasons, we can get into that in another call, why I think that's the case.
Yeah.
But they've got structural benefits that help them to be the best in the world. And so this is another thing that we were kind of considering as we were looking at 2025. I think the path to be competitive globally is to get 2 really good
Hmm.
Korean players who are among the best in the world, like we did this year, and then to put them together with the best possible players in the region that you're in. And
Yeah.
even then, there was definitely a gap between, the Koreans and our team. I think we would have done better, and I think I mentioned it earlier. Like if we were scrimming the whole year in Korea, I think we would have been as competitive as them. It's just those structural benefits of being in Asia are just not available here in North America or in Europe. So
Yeah,
so I think I'm not surprised that salaries, as you were saying, might get inflated because look, if the formula is bring in a couple of the best players in the world from whatever region, and they usually happen to be out of Korea, then the salaries for those top players in that region are going to be competitive, right? You're going to have to pay probably a premium to convince them also to come to North America. So now a bunch of your budget is invested in that. And then for the players, the best players in your region, let's say, um, well, every team is going to want those players, right?
sure.
And so for those top four, five, six players, if you want to be a world class team, it's going to be expensive, and I think there's going to be a big gap between that team and say a team three or four or five down. And there's no question you can take a bet on some rookies like we did in the LEC that I was just mentioning,
Yeah,
and see what happens. But the most likely outcome is what happened this year, where you had us as the single best team in North America, and arguably we were top three in the world. I think we ended up top three, so I will say we were the top three in the world. But even then, okay, with having the pick of the crop of the super team of the rest of the world, the gap was still pretty significant. And without doing that, the gap would be even greater. And so I don't know how you overcome that.
yeah, it's tough.
I think it's not easy. Yeah.
When you mentioned
Okay, I've got about 5 minutes left.
okay,
So
let's
just to
well
kind of give you a quick heads
no
up.
no
Yeah.
worries. You mentioned maybe we'll end on something looking towards the future thing because you mentioned traditional sports in there as well, and I am curious about how hopeful you are about the future of esports. Maybe that's an obvious thing because I feel like you're generally a pretty you're generally pretty optimistic about where things are. I mean, you guys are saying you already increased your revenue by 70%, but we're sort of far away now from Nate Nanza's dream from the Overwatch League of pro players, having a Lamborghini with a model off their hanging off their shoulder or whatever, hanging off their arms. But where is the ideal future for esports for you? I mean, if we're just talking about a pure profitability thing here, but like where could we go? Because could we get to a stage where we could still reach the heights of a traditional sports league and have that kind of revenue come on in? I mean, they also monetize their esports in much different ways, and I don't know if we can even access that type of monetization in an esport. But like, what do you see for the future of esports as we head on into the future outside of esports winter?
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think there's no question that the future is bright for esports. I think there are tremendous advantages to esports that you don't even get in traditional sports. And one of the things that we have dealt with over the last number of years is this question of monetizing, media rights versus building the base. And I think it was a mistake early on to to limit audience in exchange for money by going exclusive with a platform. So I think first and foremost, we need to build the size of the audience, right? So every platform, bring in co-streamers, bring in influencers, sign the players and promote them, bring in teams that want to invest in building out uh, audience and fans. Those are the top two things. I think we're moving in the right direction. We're seeing higher viewership, and I know in the LEC we had uh, higher, maybe the highest ever, but certainly I think we had a peak in COVID for reasons that maybe kind of accelerated some of the esports. But since we've kind of reached those highs again, I think for the World Championship of League of Legends, we hit an all-time high. So I think the growth is still there. I think we also have learned again that MTX is fundamental to the success of esports, and I'm very very happy, proud of the role that we have had in working with the publishers and the leagues to establish an MTX based ecosystem now. And professional sports teams don't have MTX in the same way that we do in this game. So that is that is a significant contributor to the industry, and so we push very hard on that, which is why I spent a lot of the time here talking about MTX rather than
Yeah.
on other things. That is the central kind of component for us. And so with MTX and a platform that is conducive towards growing audience, I think we're going to see an expansion of the industry, and then the return of sponsors to the ecosystem who want access authentically to our audience of 20 somethings that are basically not tuned into other avenues that they might try to reach them at, or with. So then I haven't given up on media rights for down the road, but I do think, let's kind of park that for 5 years, maybe 10 years, right? You didn't get to those types of deals in football or basketball, in year 1 or 2 or 3, right? Let's build this out, um, and then we can kind of revisit that. Finally, what I'll say is just, the influencer team uh, partnerships. As when we kind of transition this year, we acquired the assets of KOI, and we acquired riders from Madrid, and then we were already very strong in North America. But we brought in Ibai Lanos and
Hmm.
Gerard Piqué and a lot of influencers, Conecro, Sergio Ferra, a whole bunch of people over there that have just driven our numbers up tremendously. And these guys aren't mercenaries for hire as influencers. They are there. They bleed our team. Okay. And the engagement number with our fans is tremendous. And so that partnership between influencers, teams, MTX, audience, and fans, okay, help both the publisher and the esports organization really grow the business in a profitable way. And I think
Yeah.
for the first time, I see a model here that can be successful. And I don't think it can be successful just barely. I think it can be very successful. I think esports teams have the potential to be even more profitable on a percentage basis than traditional sports teams because of the revenue sources that we have. And I think let's stay the course. Let's not make any more stupid moves, kind of departures or experiments that don't work. Let's kind of stay the current course. We're in a good path, and let's do more of the same. And I think, again, I'm super optimistic, just based on where we are, and my discussions with other team owners who I think are aligned on the path forward.
Amazing. In our final exit in under 30 seconds, just as something extremely fun, you can give the quickest answer that you want here. Knowing what you know now about everything, if you could go back to 2018, what's the number one thing that you would do differently?
Probably not spend as much money in the early days. Yeah. Uh, I think most teams
Good
would say
answer.
that. I think we were all glossy-eyed with our own forecasts at that time, and I think we would have probably have toned it down a little bit had we known now what we should have known then.
All right, amazing. Thank you so much, and I look forward to potentially seeing OAM and maybe Toronto, maybe Ultra back in 2026. Adam Adamou, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.
My pleasure.